Hi, it's Ken. Welcome to this week's Frequently Asked Spiritual Questions video. If this is your first time here on my channel, I invite you to subscribe and click the bell to be notified when new videos are released. My focus in responding to your questions is to support you in deepening your experience of and relationship with the divine. This week's question comes from David. David writes, Ken, thank you for all you do. Forgiveness is on my mind, heart, and soul as a desire for years. Yet it is quite a challenge to actually feel it in my heart of hearts, even though I really want to. How do I forgive myself for all the horrible sins of my youth? How do I forgive the lies, sneaking, cheating, stealing, and betrayal of others? I mean, really feel it. An experience of it, not just think, desire, and talk about it. This pain of not feeling and experiencing true forgiveness is still weighing on me after decades knowing and consciously trying to release it. Please share your guidance and counsel. Thank you, David Newman. David, I have emotion coming up in me as I'm sitting with the question. Thank you for the beautiful question and for your authenticity and your vulnerability in asking it. And of course, I'm thinking about my own journey in forgiveness of my own sins, as you said. So there are so many different ways to approach forgiveness. And I just want to be in the raw flow of my own approach to forgiveness. And I don't know that I've ever talked really about this before. So thank you. Truly, thank you for the question. So one of the things that I think is really important is to realize that the illusion of separation, the belief and experience that we are separate from God, separate from ourselves, and separate from each other, is at the root of all human behavior. All human behavior. And there's a continuum of experiences on the illusion of separation, right? On the one hand, we could call it an excruciating level of pain. And let's say on that end, that pain creates a dynamic where the behavior that results is genocide, killing thousands or millions of people, murdering them. And we can think of people in history who have done that. And the key, from my perspective, when I think about those people, is that they are as much a part of me as the most resonant expression of a human being that you can conjure up right now, or I can conjure up right now. And because we are all one. The divine is in each of us in equal measure, including you, including me. And so there's one end of the continuum. And at some point on this continuum, let's mark that point at a place called piercing separation. And everything on the other side is an experience of what is actually real. So now the illusion of separation is no longer informing behavior and perspective in this continuum. And let's say at the ultimate expression of this is what some people would call full enlightenment or complete integration. My language for it is to be an embodied messenger. You're so fully integrated in every aspect of the divine expression as you that God's gifts as you express merely by your presence. However you talk about it, do you see the continuum of separation, all human behavior? So if we think about our own lives, And I mean, I was raised Catholic actually in my early youth. I left it in my adolescence. But so the language of sin and so on was part of my early experience as a human being. And I really have the sense that sin is nothing more than separation. I'm not a biblical scholar. I certainly invite a conversation about this in the comments below the video or wherever you'd like, through the feedback form, through submitting questions and so on. My strong sense of it is that sin is nothing more than separation. And so if we understand that, we can begin recognizing that there is this developmental progression to our behavior. And I want to highlight a couple of pieces here that are very natural, normal aspects of the developmental journey in consciousness. I've talked before in this series about the stages of consciousness, and you can look at probably just about any video and see some reference or link in the description to other insights or videos around that. But if you look at late stage one, late victim consciousness, there's a dynamic that Dr. Stephen Karpman calls the drama triangle, which is referred to as Karpman's drama triangle because he named it. He recognized this pattern wherein we see ourselves or other people, and this actually is a dynamic that can exist within an individual or within a group, two people or three or more people. In a dynamic of triangulation, there's a perpetrator, there's a victim, and there's a rescuer. And this is, I've identified this as an aspect of late victim consciousness because it's an attempt to secure control. Well, if we look at this in individual lives or in the context of a community or a society, you can actually see how violence is an aspect or an expression of the drama triangle, right? Behaving, so the perpetrator, it could be a psychological dynamic, it could be a physical dynamic. There are all sorts of things that are happening there. And I'm not trying to suggest that's happened in your world, David. It's that if it has, I would associate that with an attempt to secure control. Because from the perspective of victim consciousness, it is developmentally appropriate to try to find control when you've had no control. In the same way, in the experience of controlling consciousness, we're essentially discovering and exploring the limits of the empowered separate self. If we want to rename that, and I hesitate to do this because I don't want this to stick, but we could call it the empowered sinner within. It's all I mean there is the part that is empowered to discover its efficacy in the world and direct God accordingly. That's controlling consciousness. So, okay, you want to know how to experience this, though. You weren't asking me for the intellectual piece. You want to know how to experience it. Okay, so let's connect it to experience. Because in the journey of integration, which I think follows the journey of embodiment, in victim consciousness, we're in our minds. In controlling consciousness, we're in our minds and our heart. In conduit consciousness, we're in our hips. Now we're in the being presence. That's what I relate to the experience, all caps, from your question that you're looking for. You're looking for the embodied experience of this forgiveness. Well, another way of talking about forgiveness is love. We're talking about you loving yourself deeply, profoundly. And the challenge is, I want to suggest to you, and it's not about you, David, this is true for all of us. We are incapable of loving ourselves at this depth on our own. In separation, we're completely incapable of it. But when we surrender our lives to the divine, and go through that process, which is a profound journey of integration, when we go through that, we not only experience God's unconditional love, but it actually, at least this is how I would language it, my experience of it, it's an experience of something beyond me expressing as me, for whom its sole focus is me. And not just this part of me, not just my right shoulder or my left shoulder or this earlobe or this part of my life or this behavior. It's all of it. And there's a deeper level in that integrative journey that we begin to be aware of. If it's not a record scratch for you, I just want to acknowledge this because this could be coming up for you and for others as well. Maybe you're having memories or awareness of other lifetimes where perhaps you behaved as someone who committed genocide. I'm aware of that in my own past lifetimes, that there was a past lifetime when I committed genocide. And that was really hard for me for a long time. And even after I surrendered, it took a while to integrate that. And maybe it's still integrating. I don't want to try to claim that I've arrived or anything like that. That feels completely disingenuous to me. I simply want to say the experience of being embodied in God's love for me, God's love for you, which is only available through surrender. And there it is a being experience felt throughout the entire being and also in the heart emotionally and also in the mind. Yes, but they are secondary or tertiary to the primary experience of the embodied presence of unconditional love for every part of you, that I believe that which you seek begins to express. I'm smiling because the act of seeking is coming from a pursuit, that which is beyond me. Surrender is about opening up to what is already there. It's the transition from holding out a stop sign to God saying, I got this covered and I'm going to tell you how we're going to do this. Do as I say, to, and you are my servant, God, to, God, I am your servant. I have been pursuing this experience of unconditional love, but through my many efforts and toils for years or decades, I have found the limit, and the limit is I am incapable. Yet when I surrender, I open up to the unknown expression, yet experienceable expression of unconditional love. And with that, forgiveness follows, and a deep and profound resonance takes up an expression through every part of your being and life. And as you look at these behaviors from earlier in your life, these experiences, these encounters with other people, with yourself, you can begin to love them, to forgive yourself, and love them fully as God does. I would love to hear what's coming up for you, David, and every member of the community. If you're watching this video, you're part of the community. I would love to hear from you. Reflect, share what's coming up for you. Ask in the comments below if you would, please. Or if you prefer, you can use a link in the description to submit your spiritual question or questions. If this video resonates with you, I invite you to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. You can click the bell to be notified when new videos are released. And of course, please do formally join our community by heading over to kenwstone.com and adding your name and email address to my newsletter there. Peace.